Numbers. I might even get you out a little early today. Right. So the Moabite king, King Balak. And this is going to be an interesting little passage, and it's more than just about a donkey speaking. It's typically the focus. There's some really interesting theological high points that come out of the exchange between Balaam, this prophet for hire. He's has apparently a reputation of being a good prophet. And let's take a look at the context. In verse 1, the sons of Israel journeyed and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan opposite Jericho. Verse 2, now Balak son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites, so Moab was in great fear because of the people, for they were numerous, and Moab was in dread of the sons of Israel. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this horde will lick up all that is around us, as the ox licks up the grass of the field. And Balak, son of Zippor, was king of Moab at that time. So he sent messengers to Balaam, son of Beor, at Pethor, which is near the river in the land of the sons of his people, to call him, saying, behold, a people came out of Egypt. Behold, they cover the surface of the land, and they are living opposite me. So where Balaam is somewhat of a mystery. He's coming from the river, which is an interesting reference to the Mesopotamian area. So he comes in, Balaam, this prophet for hire apparently, coming in to this situation. It's interesting how the Lord is going to use this prophet, this non-Israelite prophet, to turn the side of history with regards to the situation. He's going to use this prophet. He's going to speak through this prophet to address this King Balak and the situation with Israel. And he's going to speak truth about what God's agenda is and what God's plan is with regards to his people through this non-Israelite prophet. Let's take a look at some of the details. And this is going to occur in like 4 rounds. There's going to be 4 oracles or prophetic speeches that are going to come out of the mouth of Balaam. And so Balak sends out to find Balaam. And in chapter 22, verse 8, let's see here. So when they find Balaam, Balaam's going to, in this first encounter, speak to these elders. Balak's going to send out the elders or the leaders from his town to find Balaam and talk him into coming in and performing this cursing ceremony. And Balaam says to them in verse 8, spend the night here, and I will bring word back to you as the capital Lord may speak to me. And the leaders of Moab stayed with Balaam. It's interesting, that we have this exchange between, the covenant name of Yahweh, and then we go back to, in verse 9, Elohim, and God, capital G-O-D, came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? Sometimes we see the authors of the biblical texts will use those terms. We've talked about this before with regards to the debate over Mosaic authorship. The interchange between Yahweh and Elohim. I think Moses uses both of those terms intentionally to signal significant theological activity that's going on in the historical recording. So he's signaling us here that what's about ready to happen may be coming from, well, not just God, but a particular, God, the covenant God. There's going to be some emphasis on the idea of covenant, perhaps, with the signaling of capital L, or Yahweh. That's capital L-R-R-D is Yahweh. That's his covenant name. That was the name revealed to Israel at Mount Sinai, so in the fullness. So this is maybe a signal that there's going to be more unpacking of the fullness of who God is. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry for walking in like that, but is it a possibility because of God's name and reputation being known just through deliverance of the people through Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
that Balaam himself would have known God by this name and could have at some point communed
Yeah, that's somewhat.
with the Lord by this name.
God's certainly capable of revealing himself.
Kind of like how we saw that,
Yeah.
that episode where the prophets were asking Jesus about a God, doing things in his name.
Mm.
He had to tell them, well, they're not against you. It's not against you, it's for you,
Yeah.
know. And this is apparently a character that's acting and doing things in the name of Jesus that we don't know
Yeah.
anything about, but yet
Yeah.
somehow he has had
I can picture Balaam poised and kind of like as a kind of a prophet for hire. He's probably familiar with all of the Canaanite gods. And all of a sudden, here's this new one that comes along from this Israelite group, like you're saying, the name and reputation, like, kind of like Rahab, She's hearing about the reputation of Yahweh even before, those spies come in. And I've heard about your God, she says. So this is the kind of thing maybe that you're right. It's not, we don't have a lot to go on in the text, but, it's possible that, he's been trying to, there's kind of we'll see that in Balaam here, there's kind of a transformation that takes place when he firmly engages the fact that he's engaging Yahweh, he's engaging the God of the Israelites here, and I've got to speak his words, not be a pagan prophet and be willy-nilly about it. I'm got to speak word for word what Yahweh is telling me to do. So he's somewhat of a mystery, somewhat of a mystery. So,
okay, so could the use of like Elohim be like saying that he's not part of, like not calling it, like talking about the interactions between Balaam and God and not Balaam and the Lord? Could it be like talking about he's not under that covenant, like he's not with God necessarily at this point in time, like he's not submitting to that?
Well, yeah, at first here he's certainly not.
Yeah.
There's
like,
going to be.
It just seems like that saying they're not is necessarily, he's not a true, like,
He's not
with God necessarily, he's just.
He's not a prophet of Israel.
Yeah.
Moses is the prophet. He's speaking, he's hearing from God. Now God's going to raise up someone outside of the family, so to speak, to speak through to this other non-Israelite king. So, there's certainly some things like that going on in the text. There's kind of this, a little bit of a tension here with this Balaam character, And we'll just keep looking at how this plot develops. In chapter 22, let's look at verses 9 through 12. Then God came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men with you?" And Balaam said to God, "Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent word to me. Behold, there is a people who came out of Egypt, and they cover the surface of the land. Now come, curse them for me. Perhaps I may be able to fight against them and drive them out." God said to Balaam, "Do not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed." So he's going to have to be corrected a little bit theologically. And we see here that what breaks through here at the very beginning is how the Lord here is reminding this pagan prophet, this prophet for hire apparently, the original purpose that he had made, the promise that he had made as Yahweh through Abraham. Genesis 12:3. And let's just take a look one more time at Genesis 12:3 in the original patriarchal promise. And we see, speak to all the that's Exodus, sorry. This is the part that'll probably be kind of front and center to the whole Balaam-Balak exchange. The Lord promises to Abraham, and then eventually and as a reiteration to Israel, "I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in all of you, all of the families of the earth shall be blessed." It's the idea of being blessed, and as a result, being a conduit of blessing to the nations. So the first group of Balak's elders return with the bad news. Balak returns more elders, and he sends more back with a little bit higher financial stake with regards to this transaction. this proposition. And what's interesting is what we see in Balaam's reply in verse 18. So this is verse 18. And Balaam answers and says to the servants of Balak, though Balak were to give me his house, full of silver and gold, I could not do anything, either small or great, contrary to the command of Yahweh, my God. See that? So there's capital L-O-R-D showing up. And here I think, it recognizes Balaam is getting his head and maybe even heart around the reality that here's this God who's speaking to him, this covenant God. He's wanting me to act on behalf of him and his people. So this is a pretty significant realization. So the call now is for God to say, go ahead and go with them. And Balaam arose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the elders of Moab. All right, so we move on. And what's interesting is in chapter 22, verse 22, what's a little bit surprising, or what comes as somewhat of a surprise, is the anger of the Lord. And in verse 22, but God was angry because he was going. And the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. Now he was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. So what we have here is a little bit of what in the world, why is God angry? I mean, isn't Balaam just doing what he was commanded to do? Just kind of shows up out of nowhere. Let's take a look at some of the clues I think that might give us a little insight in terms of God's anger. You see in verse 20, just a few verses before, with the command to go, the details are there in the text. If the men have come to call you, rise up and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you, you shall do. So there's a real, there's going to be a close attachment to Balaam's words, to the very words that the Lord gives Balaam to speak. All right, so chalk that in and keep that in the back of your mind there. And then let's look at verses down through verse, let's see, the details of the conflict. Now let's look at the conflict in a little more detail. And let's have verses 22 through 35. Let's see, Paul Eaton, could you read for us?
22 through what?
22 through 35.
Okay. But God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as his adversary. Now he was riding on the donkey, and his 2 servants were with them. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with a drawn sword in his hand. And the donkey turned aside out of the road and went into the field. And Balaam struck the donkey to turn her into the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow path between the vineyards with a wall on either side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pushed against the wall and pressed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he struck her again. Then the angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn either to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. And Balaam's anger was kindled, and he struck the donkey with the staff. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times? And Balaam said to the donkey, because you have made a fool of me. I wish I had a sword in my hand, for then I would kill you. And the donkey said to Balaam, am I not your donkey, on which you have ridden all your life long to this day? Is it my habit to treat you this way? And he said, no. Then the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his drawn sword in his hand, and he bowed down and fell on his face. And the angel of the Lord said to him, why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I have come out to oppose you because your way is perverse before me.
Let's just pause there. Because your way is perverse before me. That's a little bit of a clue in verse 32. Behold, because your way was contrary to me, or reckless, the idea of reckless in the Hebrew. In verse 32, compare that to verse 22. the angel of the Lord took his stand in the way as an adversary against him. Well, this is the speculation there. There's not a lot to go on, but think of it this way. Balaam is a prophet for hire in the pagan sense. So he's called into a situation. He's going to kind of, whether or not he's hearing from gods, probably not. These are pagan gods. So he's moving into a situation. He can pretty much steer the situation however he wants. I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm going to play this game as best I can. But in this case, he's encountering the real God, the God of the universe, who's speaking to him. And the Lord is saying, you can't do your own thing when you go and talk to this king of Moab. Your words have to be my words, not fabricated words. So the Lord knows that this pagan prophet, Balaam, is going to have kind of a high control. He can't do his own thing. So there's kind of this encounter, and there's kind of some irony here. Because, it's the Lord way. You might, trying to have a hard time putting this into words, but the Lord's saying, I can speak through a donkey, I can speak through you. If I can put words into this donkey's mouth, Balaam, I can do the same thing with you. Unless, if you do your own thing, I'll be doing the same thing to you as I'm speaking through this donkey. So it's kind of a real visual sermon illustration here for Balaam. So he learns this quick lesson, and in verse 38, he speaks to the king. Balaam says to Balak, "Behold, I have come now to you. Am I able to speak anything at all? The word that God puts in my mouth, that I shall speak." See, he's learned his lesson. Verse 38. And verse 41 reminds us that we are truly on pagan turf, in pagan territory. Then it came about in the morning that Balak took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal. And from there, he saw a portion of the people. So he's setting him up for this cursing episode. There's got to be, these are the people, I want you to curse them. So what happens next? And we have the first round in chapter 23. Let's take a look at verses 5 through 10. And let's see here. How about Cole? Where are you? Back here. Could you read for us in chapter 23, verses 5 through 10?
Then the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth and said, "Return to Balak, and you shall speak thus." So he returned to him, and behold, he was standing beside his burnt offering, he and all the leaders of Moab. He took up his discourse and said, "From Aram Balak has brought me, Moab's king from the mountains of the east. Come curse Jacob for me, and come denounce Israel. How shall I curse whom God has not cursed? And how can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? As I see him from the top of the rocks, and I look at him from the hills, behold, a people who dwells apart, and will not be reckoned among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number the fourth part of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his."
All right, let's just pause there. So that's the first prophetic oracle from Balaam. I just want to focus on who can count the dust of Jacob or number the fourth part of Israel. What we're going to start to see here is, interestingly, the words of the covenant promises to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and coming in now in some bits and pieces of the prophetic dialogue of Balaam. If we remind ourselves, let's turn back to Genesis chapter 13. Genesis chapter 13, verse 6. Keep turning to Exodus. Genesis 13, verse 6. There we go. And the land could not sustain them while dwelling together, for their positions. Wait a minute. 13. Is that right? No, I messed up.
Is it 16?
16, verse 6, huh?
No, 13 verse 16.
Oh, 13. I left out a 1. 13, verse 16. Yes. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can number the dust of the earth, then your descendants can be numbered. So this promise of through Abraham, through this, there will emerge a great nation. This is now being affirmed by the prophetic words of Balaam. And we saw this same kind of recognition in the details of the dust of Jacob. Genesis 15, if you remember when Abraham has his faith crisis, do you remember that? The context there. God says, go out and count the stars. Look to the heavens and count the stars if you are able to count them. And he said, so shall your descendants be. And in chapter 17, verse 6, the Lord says, I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come forth from you. Yes, that's right. That's the reference to the king there. So this is what we have going on. So there's going to be references now back to the patriarch, of all things, the patriarchal covenant, an Abrahamic covenant extended through. So Balak takes Balaam again to show him the Israelite camp again. Instead, Balaam hears again from the Lord and offers yet another blessing. So in chapter 23, let's look down to verse 18 through 24. So this keeps happening, and we've got about 4 rounds. This is round 2. Then he took up his discourse and said, Arise, O Balak, and hear. Give ear to me, O sons of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. Has he said, and will he not do it? Do what? Right? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? Behold, I have received the command to bless. When he is blessed, then I cannot revoke it. He has not observed misfortune in Jacob, nor has he seen trouble in Israel. The Lord, his God, is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. Now this thing grows, right? So that reference to king, or a king, will emerge as a part of the Abrahamic promise. So we see the Lord is with him, verse 21. The shout of a king is coming among them, or from them, verse 21. And Israel is described as a lion who will rise up. That's down here. Where do we see that? All the way at the end. Behold, the people rises up like a lioness, and as a lion it lifts itself. It shall not lie down until it devours the prey and drinks the blood of the slain. So this reference to lion, if we look back at Genesis chapter 49, in the fatherly blessing, Jacob's blessing in chapter 49, we start to see some repetition here. Judah is like a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion. Who dares arouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. So this reference to the lion is symbolic, and this reference to the scepter that shall not part. Of course, this is a reference to a king who will come from Judah. So Balak, he calls for round 3, and this is the third oracle. It seems that Balaam is, by this time, in this round 3, he's experienced a little bit of a personal transformation. He may have realized that these people, these Israelites, are really truly on a divinely inspired mission. And with this oracle, we have reference to the Spirit of God coming upon Balaam. And you see that in, chapter 24 we're in. Let's take a look at this oracle here. When Balaam saw that it had pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go, as at other times, to seek omens, but he set his face toward the wilderness. And Balaam lifted his eyes and saw Israel camping tribe by tribe. Whenever somebody lifts their eyes and sees, it's oftentimes a signal of God revealing something. Abraham lifts his eyes and sees the ram caught in the thicket. You know, this idea of seeing also sometimes is language of confirming that God is doing something. It's God that's doing something. Balaam lifts his eyes and saw Israel camping tribe by tribe, and the Spirit of God came upon him. This is the first time, as I said. And he took up his discourse and says, the oracle of Balaam, son of Beor, and the oracle of the man whose eyes opened, the oracle of him who hears the words of God, who sees the vision of the El Shaddai, falling down yet having his eyes uncovered. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel, like the valleys that stretch out, like gardens beside the river, like aloes planted by the Lord, capital L-O-R-D, like cedars beside the waters. Water shall flow from his buckets, and his seed shall be by many waters, and his king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings out of Egypt, for he is for him like the horns of the wild ox. He shall devour the nations who are his adversaries, and shall crush their bones in pieces, and shatter them with his arrows. He lies down as a lion, and as a lion who dares rouse him. Blessed is everyone who blesses you, and cursed is everyone who curses you. So even more of an emphatic bring back some of the language that we saw from before. It's interesting, the picture of the gardens by the river, water flowing is a blessing, right, that's going to come through Israel to the nations, Genesis 12:3. Verse 9 is a recounting and reaffirmation from verse 3, the original, that's Genesis 12:3, of the original unconditional promise, almost verbatim. Blessed is everyone who blesses you, and cursed is everyone who curses you. So, very strongly stated reaffirmation. In response, verse 10, Balak is not very happy about this. His anger is burning against Balaam, and he struck his hands together, and Balak said to Balaam, I called you to curse my enemies, but behold, you have persisted in blessing them these 3 times. And then Balaam defends his position against the king and says in verse 12, Did I not tell your messengers whom you had sent to me, saying, Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything contrary to the command of the Lord, either good or bad, of my own accord. What the Lord speaks, that I will speak. And now behold, I am going to my people come, and I will advise you what this people will do to your people in the days to come. So the final discourse, verse 15, the oracle of Balaam, son of Beor, and the oracle of the man whose eye is open, the oracle of him who hears the words of God, knows the knowledge of the Most High, El Elyon, who sees the vision of El Shaddai, falling down yet having his eyes uncovered. I see him. It's interesting, but not now. What's he see? What's he seeing in this vision? Balaam. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come forth from Jacob. A scepter shall rise from Israel, and shall crush, a.k.a. 3:15, through the forehead of Moab, and tear down all the sons of Sheph. And Edom shall be a possession. Seir, its enemies, also shall be a possession. While Israel performs valiantly, one from Jacob shall have dominion, and shall destroy the remnant from the city. Let's see here. Did I get all of that? Yeah. Yeah, so the scepter, Genesis 49 that we saw, the language of crushing kind of is an echo of Genesis 3:15, and some of those things that we know. A king is coming, and that's just an interesting... After this, Balaam will return to his place. That's what we have in verse 25. Balaam arose and departed and returned to his place, and Balak also went his way. So, unfortunately, what we know about Balaam after this is in the skirmish in chapter 39. We'll jump ahead there in verse 8. In the battle with the Midianites, Numbers chapter 31, verse 8. Balaam and the son of Beor was killed in that battle with the Midianites. So, unfortunately, it's interesting. He's kind of a mysterious figure, Balaam, but shows up and speaks at a very pivotal time, speaks theological truth to this pagan king Balak, in terms of blessing and cursing Israel. So, unfortunately, though, we have in the next part of the Numbers in chapter 25, let me just quickly go over this. Israel stops to have breakfast at the International House of Baal, the IHOP. You get it? Oh, come on. I know it's Monday. I thought I'd throw that in. It's almost like another golden calf episode, what we have here in chapter 25, the sin of Peor. And we see the influence of paganism. This is like how quickly it can happen. It's kind of shocking. Israel's camping here, and they play the harlot, verse 1, with the daughters of Moab. So they're camping out here, and the influence of the Moabites. Verse 2, for they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor, and Yahweh was angry against his nose burned against Israel. And the Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and execute them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. So this is serious stuff. This can't happen so close to what's going to happen next. This is kind of a very sharp disciplinary slap and disciplinary maneuver, I guess. It's shocking what happens. And we talked about this Baal. Here he is pictured. He's the fertility god, also the Canaanite storm god. He's the one who brings rains and the kinds of things that cause crops to grow well. So he's that fertility rain idea in the Canaanite godhead. And like I said before, this is the God who wants to take over Yahweh's role as the one who provides in the bounty in terms of crops. And he's going to be a forever thorn in the side of Israel in terms of her spiritual fidelity as things move ahead. So this is part of the issue. Chapter 25, verses 1 through 5. And there what we see is this stern discipline, this judgment that happens that evokes the death penalty, right, for these elders. We're going to see in the book of Deuteronomy next week when we get there is that there's going to be these capital offense laws that are written in to the law code, you might say, of Moses' instruction. Because what's at stake in terms of the spiritual aspects of what's going to happen next in the land, the stakes are high. And there's certain things that need to be addressed and defined with regards to what constitutes spiritual rebellion. What constitutes an extreme threat against the well-being, the shalom, literally the life and death of the Israelite community. So there are going to be some spiritual things that bring about this kind of stern law that evokes capital offense. The idea we have those kinds of laws in our culture. There's things that need to be defined. How often they were applied, we don't have all of the details. Always, though, we have, when we get to Deuteronomy, you'll see this, things were not applied willy-nilly or mob rule. If there's a capital offense that happened in the community, the elders would be there to hear the case and render the decision. Depends, and so the legal process would take place after that part. But there's some things that put really the name and the spiritual name and reputation of Yahweh at stake. That's how significant it is. So, but this is the generation that should have known better. What happens in Numbers chapter 25 should not have happened, and it just shows that failure at this point is not an option. This is a generation that had 40 years to learn the lesson of the wilderness. Yahweh, the name Yahweh and his reputation is at stake. So then we get to Numbers chapter 26, which, as we saw, is the second census. The generation of the wilderness now is counted, and inventory is taken. And we see in chapter 27, there's verse 15. We see a significant leadership baton passed from Moses to Joshua. In verse 15, Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, May the Lord, the God of this, the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation who will go out and come in before them, who will lead them and bring them out and bring them in, that the congregation of Yahweh may not be like sheep which have no shepherd. So the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand upon him, and have him stand before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation, and commission him in their sight. So we have this transfer of leadership. And chapter 33, I'll end with this. Verse 50. There's a significant chapter 33, verses down here in verse 50. The law of possessing the land. And this is an anticipation of the what next theologically and what has to happen, and kind of lays out the foundation of this is really an encounter, a spiritual battle that's taking place. Not a battle between earthly kings, but you might say a battle between spiritual kings and domains. This whole pagan idea. The Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan opposite Jericho, saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you cross over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, and destroy all their figured stones, destroy all their molten images, and demolish all their high places, and you take possession of the land and live in it. For I have given the land to you to possess it, and you shall inherit the land by lot according to your households, your families. To the larger you shall give more inheritance, and to the smaller you shall give less inheritance. Wherever the lots fall to anyone, that shall be his. You shall inherit according to the tribes of your fathers. But if you do not drive out, this is the high point, if you don't drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall come about that those whom you let remain of them will become as pricks in your eyes and as thorns in your sides, and they shall trouble you in the land in which you shall live. And it shall come about that as I plan to do to them, so I will do to you. So that kind of lays it out, doesn't it? You see that right away after Joshua. We'll look at the book of Judges, and we'll come back to this, and we'll see that the leftover, unconquered nations will become sources of all things testing and refining against Israel. They'll cause the conflict, and the opposition will, in a sense, turn up the heat against God's own people. And the unconquered nations, even further and down the road, will continue to be an ongoing source of distraction because of the pagan influence. Baal doesn't go away, and this will come right back around, so that by the time we get to the monarchy, we don't have kings who are stepping in, dealing with the problem, except for a few spiritual reforms. And by the time we get past Josiah, even in Judah and the south, we've got exile. So eventually, God's basically saying on the front end, there's no pagan activity in the land of my promised land, in the land of Canaan. This is my land, and no nation, even if it's you, Israel, will act like pagans in this place. Otherwise, exile. Just like I'm exiling these nations, God says up front, if you become like them, then I'm going to have to exile you as well. And that's what we have. So, all right, well, thanks for your patience today. And the reading quiz and the discussion group question will be posted by mid-afternoon. And we'll have another week of activity. And we'll look at Deuteronomy next week.